Man, this game is a friggin' mess. I'm perplexed how Eidos Montreal, a studio that got rebooting Deus Ex so right, managed to get nearly everything wrong in making a reboot of Theif with Thief 4. I can't recall the last time I played a game that's so boring, middle of the road, and soulless. Why did I play Thief 4? I've been aware for a long time to stay away, and after passing the 1k subscribers, thank you very much everyone, I polled people if they'd like a video first on Thief 4 or Deus Ex Invisible War, games with not the best of reputations. Thief 4 barely won out. I snagged a copy of the game for a couple of bucks on a Steam sale, and even then I still felt paying $2 was a ripoff for Thief 4. Unlike the Deus Ex reboots, Thief 4 completely misses the mark on what made the first 3 Thief games, especially the first 2, so beloved and special. If Thief 1 and 2 is like an early 90s Tori Amos serenading us with her beautiful tunes, and Thief Deadly Shadows is an older Tori Amos who's maybe lost a few steps but still got it, Thief 4 is what happens when someone stepped in and say, hey, you know what we should have instead? Cardi B. So let's take a look at this friggin' mess that is Thief 4, and I'm going to need a little help from a friend to get through this one. Before diving in, I will note that I'm not only going to be comparing this title to the previous Thief games, but I'm also going to be comparing it to the reboot Deus Ex games, as Thief 4 comes from the same studio. Even though it was led by a different team, Eidos Montreal is a fairly small team size compared to most larger studios, so there was a lot of crossover. So let's dig in my taffers. Where did things go wrong with Thief 4? I pulled up some information on some of the behind the scene aspects of Thief 4, and while not a ton of information was available, it did help paint a picture of what went wrong. Development of Thief 4 looks to have started somewhere in 2008 or 2009, starting with a small team to experiment with a variety of ideas. This was done in order to avoid million-dollar disasters, well let's see how that turned out, and keep the team small until a clear idea emerged. The team experimented with a brand new character, and also experimented with making things more akin to Assassin's Creed title, getting around the environment. This was scaled back as the constant switch between third person to first person made people nauseous, although some of this would still remain in the final game. At some point in 2012, the studio hired Splinter Cell veteran Stefan Waugh as producer in an attempt to bring focus to the project. His job was to quote-unquote figure out the original mandate of the project and avoid any confusion caused by the team's years of experimentation. This is a very vague statement, but when I read it, the thing that popped into mind was, okay fellows, let's lock this down and get the game out. In mid-2013, Eidos Montreal founder and general manager Stéphane Dasteau resigned that he had irreconcilable differences with parent company Square Enix. Quote, the lack of leadership, lack of courage, and the lack of communication were so evident that I wasn't able to conduct my job correctly. I realized their differences were irreconcilable, and that the best decision was unfortunately to part ways. Damn. Professional and cold. Writer Rihanna Pratchett, best known for her works on titles like the Tomb Raider reboot series, was hired and attached to the project for a time, although with the final product only a little bit of her work remained. What that is, it's hard to really determine, but she did mention it was some world building and some of the cutscenes. A few years after the release of Thief, Rihanna remembered that none of the people who had employed her to work on the Thief reboot were left on the team. Quote, they had gone different ways, and I was like, I don't know what to do anymore. The reason I don't really talk about this is I love the Thief games and really wish things had turned out differently. I actually actively pursued working on it. We had great ideas at the start, and that was a real development hell project. Now to be clear, game development is messy, and it's not like games that turn out well didn't have tons of inner turmoil going on behind the scenes. Hell, Thief 1 had tons of that going on, but it is something to make note of. So let's get the good out of the way first, because there's not much to say here. What went right about Thief 4? Well, there's the option of custom difficulty. I'm a big fan of games giving the player the option to get more intricate with how the difficulty of the game wants to be, instead of just having an easy, medium, or hard mode. Other games that made use of this in the genre as well are Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider. Greatly appreciate it, guys. I'm also going to note I disabled the HUD as much as possible, objective markers, the mini-map, so on. More on that later though. The music, while not as memorable as the previous Thief games, did have some good background tunes going on here and there. Controlling Garrett mostly feels quite tight, with a few changes here and there, for better for worse, but more on that later, but no real complaints here on the controls. In between missions, we could wander the city akin to Thief Deadly Shadows. There's a lot of things tucked away here in various houses, and with navigating through these areas, we have quite a number of options of getting around. It's in these areas where the game feels most like the original games of old, and do give proof that somewhere deep down, there was capacity of Thief 4 being a good game. And that's about it. So let's strap in and get down to it, because there's a lot to discuss of what went wrong. So right off the bat, let's talk about the sound design of Thief 4. If you ask any Theifer, one of the best things that the other Thief games did right was the use of sound design to know enemy placement. If there was anything the team needed to get right, it was the importance of sound design in regards to stealth. Most stealth games since Thief have gone for a visual approach to stealth, with sound design being the lesser choice. Some games make use of it well, like the Splinter Cell or Metal Gear games, but there's been a number of stealth games that make use of what I call lazy design, where you have to rely on mini-maps, the ability to see through walls to have any idea of where enemies are. And while this was available in the Eidos Montreal Deus Ex games, I didn't make use of them, and the game was very playable without them. So how was the sound design in Thief 4? Well, take a listen for yourself.
What else has he got locked away? I hate that friggin' bird.
Now, does that sound anything like the old Thief games? I had several times throughout my playthrough where I went around corners only to run smack into enemies because I could not hear shit. Not only that, there's tons of dialogue throughout the game that has a really weird mixing, both in cutscenes and elsewhere.
You crack a smile.
Do everyone a favor.
I never!
The Iron Tyrant's killing us! He won't...
Alas, the Baron has him chained up in Grey Stars. A message to those who might oppose him.
And they never patched this up. Not only is the sound design and mixing nowhere up to Thief standards, it's just not up to standards in general. Now, to be clear, I know that the old Thief sound design was some state-of-the-art shit that few games have able to replicate since. But, you know, if you're going to get a Thief reboot right, this is probably your #1 priority, and Thief 4 utterly fails beyond belief. Good lord, we're not off to a good start. Okay, so they got the sound design wrong. What about level design? The Thief series is known for its sprawling level design, giving you very little indication of where you need to go, and yet while it could be easy to get lost, you could easily get a lay of the land and know what wasn't possible to traverse. You had plenty of ways in and out of areas. The games didn't make use of objective markers, so level designers had to really make things intuitive for things to make sense. The end result, of course, were incredibly strong level design and art direction to help guide us through. So Thief 4 by default will have the quest arrow for us to navigate. Okay, it's a modern game, c'est la vie. And of course you could turn it off, which I did. I played Human Revolution and Mankind Divided with these turned off, and never once had a problem of knowing where I needed to go. These games had strong level design and art direction so that they weren't needed. If games want to make use of objective markers, that's fine, but the game should still be playable without them. I've noticed in the last decade or so it's become abundantly clear games that are built around the objective marker as opposed to focusing on strong level design. Now I could add Thief 4 to that list of games built around the objective marker. The city area does have a fair amount of choices of ways that we can navigate, but does a really poor job of any kind of indication of signage or where we need to go or where we are. If I need to get to a certain area, I'd constantly be looking back and forth between my map to figure out where I needed to go. And the levels themselves, which I'll cover in detail further in the video, which are not as sprawling as the cities and far fewer options in navigation and can be shockingly linear, are still not made well and had a number of times I needed to make use of the objective marker to figure out where I needed to go. If I need to constantly be going back and forth between using the map to see where I need to go, the level design of your game has failed, my friend. But Boulder, why don't you just leave the objective markers on? Well, then it's just easy to stare at that indicator or that little section of your screen in the bottom corner, as opposed to taking in the world around you. What's the friggin' point? I see the sound and level design as the core pillars of what makes the old Thief games work and such classics, and Thief 4 completely misses the mark on both of these. But wait, there's more, we're just getting started. Let's talk about focus vision. One thing that Thief 4 makes use of that's popped up more and more in these kind of games the last decade or so is a focus vision, which will outline things you can interact with or see people. Thief 4 makes use of it as a crutch. Again, like mini-maps, if developers want to put these in, fine, whatever. If we could turn them off, that's okay. But if I need to constantly be making use of focus vision to see things I can interact with, again, you failed at quality game design. Reboot Deus Ex games had this ability, but again, the game had strong level design that I never used it. But here, there were plenty of times I'd be in a room or an area in the city and make use of focus vision just to get an idea of things I could make use of around me. Good luck using rope arrows without making use of focus vision to find where you could use them. Disabling traps, finding small switches, yep, get ready to make use of focus vision. We as players should not be needing to use this so often to get our way around and find things. Maybe if I'm stuck every once in a while, okay, but if I'm constantly hitting the button for it over and over again, how the frick did the game get this all so wrong? And speaking of vision, let's talk about light and shadows, another core concept of the Thief series. Now, Thief 4 does a better job of this compared to what I previously mentioned, but still manages to muck it up on a number of levels. The previous Thief games was always clear which areas were safe and which ones were full of light. Here it could be a bit hit or miss. Some areas seem like they'd be in the dark, but still have light, or other way around. As well, there didn't really feel like a gradual turn from darkness or light as the previous title. It seems like either you would be spotted or you wouldn't be. A really annoying thing that Thief 4 does is when stepping from a shadow into the light, there'll be a light flicker on the corner of the screen to indicate this. Guys, we already have the light indicator already. Do we really need this? Funny enough, you actually can't turn this off in the menu. You have to go into config files and mess around to do so. With that, let's talk about movement in this world, because Garrett does have some new tricks up his sleeve this time around. The first one is swooping. Yes, swooping.
Yes, swooping is bad.
By hitting a key, Garrett will quickly lunge forward in the direction we're going, allowing him to dart from cover to cover. The control's fine, but feels really unnecessary, like some higher up who didn't understand the Thief series felt the game needs something quote-unquote cool to make mention of in a press release or to put in marketing material. What about jumping? No longer can we jump at any point in time, but in certain areas we could jump, like from ledge to ledge or to a rope. While it's mostly clear where we could jump to, I wonder why this change was made. Why change it from the old style Thief where we could jump and mantle at any time? There were a number of times throughout my playthrough where I looked at an area and said, okay, I'll just jump up to there, and only for the game not to give me that option. Sorry, Taffer, you have to go the way we want you to. Another addition is the Assassin's Creed style climbing. As mentioned earlier, this was something that the team looked at having quite a bit of in earlier versions, but scaled back and still kept in the game. There's nothing really interesting to say about this. It felt like something that was added in because Assassin's Creed does it, and well, look how well that game sells. Like a marketing bullet point. When it comes to leaning, we can't just lean out at any point in time. Instead, we have to go to a corner, make use of peek, and then we can lean. I mean, I get it because it wants to appear more realistic and immersive, but there were times where I meant to lean when I didn't want to, or didn't lean when I wanted to. When we loot lootables, unlike the previous Thief games where it's instantaneous, here there's a canned animation, whether snatching something off an NPC, from a drawer, or on a desk. I don't mind this, and although it's annoying to constantly go through doors, have the animation play out only to have nothing in them, I guess it does help with my immersion. Which it does, but this is only surface level immersion. You know what would have helped with my immersion, Thief 4? If the sound design actually friggin' worked and levels weren't friggin' designed around objective markers. Opening windows takes a few seconds, or feeling around a painting for a button, or a button on a book. These are fine, but again, surface level immersion, or there are much more important things they could have worked on. Lockpicking is there, it's quick, it's competent, and that's all there really is to say about it. When it comes to combat in the previous titles, we didn't have as much as far as combat goes beyond our basic tools, since we were focused on, well, thieving. Here they expanded on it a little bit more. Instead of using a blackjack with a simple whack from behind, we need to do a takedown, another canned animation with intense music. Would a simple whack to the head have sufficed like in the previous titles? We can also do aerial takedowns where we cut to third-person perspective to see how cool we look taking them down. Wouldn't the first-person aerial takedown like they had in Dishonored been good enough? I'm guessing the team looked at their Deus Ex games with their third-person takedowns and thought, man, that would look cool in Thief. The thing is, we're not playing as this augmented tough guy. We're just a thief. It feels completely out of place. What about the combat itself? Well, if we get into combat, we could dodge, hit them and repeat. That's how it plays out. Just watch this. It's just basically a glorified QTE. Not very exciting, is it? And on that note of combat, what about the guards in this game? One of the highlights of the previous titles would be the guard dialogue with others, or when they were out on patrol talking to themselves. It really helped flesh out the world and build character.
Going to the bear pits tomorrow. You want to come with?
Couldn't pay me enough.
What? You soft belly.
Here, some of the dialogue is fine, but there's nothing that really stands out in my mind. And they love to say the word friggin'. I haven't heard the word friggin' used so much since Trailer Park Boys.
Ring the frigging bell.
that friggin' bird.
I want my freaking burger, Rick!
I guess there was fans of Trailer Park Boys on staff working on this game. Man, have you guys ever watched Trailer Park Boys? What a great show. Sure, maybe it ran a few seasons too long and the Netflix seasons weren't anything special, but those first few seasons, comedy gold. A show that focused on the fun of getting fucked up with your buddies, the importance of family, staying true to yourself. Wait, what? What are we reviewing again? Oh yeah, Thief 4. Oh yeah, there's still a lot more to cover. I haven't even talked about the story yet or doing a level breakdown, so let's get this friggin' mess out of the way. Ugh. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the story of this game is a friggin' mess, just like everything else with it. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Rihanna Pratchett did work on the game, and here's a bit more what she had to say about the experience that feels relevant to talk about now that we're here. When asked to elaborate on the decision to go with a class warfare angle rather than the original series Order-Chaos dichotomy, she replied, "Those were the building blocks I had to work with." So if you're wondering why the game goes with the class warfare angle as opposed to what the previous titles did with the Hammerites, the Keepers, the Pagans, it sounds like because someone above Rihanna's pay grade made that decision for her. One of the first major changes in the story is Garrett, especially his voice, no longer by Steven Russell, and to me, this is a great choice. Why? Because he's not associated with this game at all because it's an utter mess. And even I don't think Steven could pull off this clunky dialogue. Here's what the developers said about this change. The actor playing Garrett needed to be able to perform his own stunt. There would be a disconnect that we couldn't ignore between the concepted character and Steven's voice today. They actually did use him in early vocal recordings, but making use of him as the voice of Garrett felt like the equivalent of casting Sean Connery, rest in peace, again in the new 007 movies. Considering how this game turned out, I'd say it's for the best, and if you want your Steven Russell fix, you can play those old Thief games, or Dishonored 2, where Corvo is voiced by Steven Russell.
Every year, I think the anniversary of Jessamine's death will be easier, but it never is.
So let's take a look at the first few levels, where I'll mostly be commenting about the narrative of the game, as I've talked about the gameplay in length, but I'll make mentions at some points here and there.
But then I suppose none of that matters when you're me. After all, when did I ever pay for anything?
I don't know, all those times you mentioned paying the rent in the previous titles? I should note with the story that this game is actually set several hundred years after the original games, but set in the same universe, so just another reincarnation of Garrett. There is Basso as well. Erin, is she the girl at the end of Thief 3? We have a little bit of a tutorial to get a feel for things. And then we meet Erin. Oh, Erin, there's a lot to say about her, but more on her in a bit. So we could get from their dialogue that there's a troubled history between these two, and both these characters come across as completely unlikable right off the bat, which we're going to see shortly creates a whole bunch of issues with the story. So we start off by chasing Erin because that's what we think of when we play Thief, right, Taffers? This here felt like some higher ups saying, hey, we need to grab their attention right away, or else they'll tune out. At the beginning of my playthrough, I did leave objective markers on just to see how friggin' ridiculous this would be, and we got some dialogue between the two of them that even modern day Blizzard would be embarrassed by.
It's not how much you steal, it's what you steal.
So we're off to Mansion to get a MacGuffin to drive the plot forward. That's fine. I mean, the previous Thief games made use of this. We make our way further in, and Erin just straight up murders a guard, and Garrett rightfully scolds her. This is what I think of you, Erin. So we progress forward and end up in cutscene competence where we do things completely out of character, which the game will like to make use of going forward. And this cutscene is a friggin' mess. So what was already apparent here is how much the game breaks out gameplay for cutscenes, some externally, some in first person. One interesting quote I came across from the narrative director of the game was the following: "This is a story-driven game. The narrative in this game is really, really important." So in reading this, it kind of comes across as, hey, those old Thief games, yeah, they weren't really story-driven, which just shows how much the writers missed the friggin' point of this. If you're looking for a good way to tell a story in an efficient manner through the medium of video games, the original Thief games do a fantastic job of it. We have our mission briefing that contains what we need to do, gives some information about some of the key players and factions, gets Garrett's personality across, most of them within just a couple of minutes at most.
I was contacted by a woman named Victoria. She claims to represent a client who was impressed by the way I took care of Ramirez, and now wants me to steal something for him.
The target is a magical sword, owned by a nobleman and collector named Constantine. Little is known about Constantine except that he is an eccentric new face in the city, and mostly keeps to himself.
In the missions, through Garrett's dialogue, the environmental storytelling, and the dialogue from guards and other characters, we can build the story and piece it together, all without ever having to go into cutscene during a mission that wrestles away control from the player. But here, all control from us is constantly pulled away, and we're given mostly terrible or soulless dialogue about characters we don't care about and aren't likable whatsoever. So we wake up in a cart, and we get some insight what's been going on with the city. There's a plague, there's a lockdown, haha 2020 joke, people are dying, there's struggles going on between the classes. Okay, whatever. Let's roll with it, see where the game goes with it. We do some thieving, and I end up getting into situations of being caught, which could have been avoided had the game actually had proper sound design. So we're off to meet Basso, who is the closest the game comes to having a character that's actually likable.
I see you still can't work a door. You don't come to see me, you don't write.
Doesn't hurt that's also the same voice actor of Lazarus from Human Revolution and Mankind Divided.
What happened that fateful day in 2027 was beyond terror any of us has ever seen. Og incident? Try Og travesty.
And then Basso reveals that we've been missing for a year. What? A whole friggin' year has been gone? Why? A few days, sure. A few weeks, okay. I could roll with it. But a whole friggin' year? So we go talk to the Queen of Beggars and piece together that this plague known as the Gloom broke out in this last year and has caused the city to go into lockdown. Did we cause this with this whole MacGuffin thing? Making 1 year pass feels like such an odd choice. Couldn't have done even a few days or a few months. Instead of building intrigue for this kind of thing like a good story should, I just found myself taken out of the experience. I'm barely into this game. I'm already seeing a number of issues with the plot and characters that I haven't noticed in something probably since The Last Jedi. Anyways, we're off to go steal a ring, and we have an extremely linear level with not a lot of divergent paths, which is what to expect for this game beyond the city sections. So as we make our way further in, we eventually come across the Thief Taker General, our mustache-twirling antagonist, which feels like the writers watched Gangs of New York, tried to create an antagonist similar to Bill the Butcher, but only got the surface level right, and what we end up with is a flat, one-note antagonist.
And for my men to do what they're fucking told.
We eventually get the ring, but are spotted by the Thief Taker General, and of course a cutscene, and the guards are on high alert. While escaping, we come across this one room which I feel is the summary of all the issues I have with Thief 4's level design. So we see this window up here, and we know that's where we need to go. So there's all these blocks stacked on the right side, so can we climb up these? Nope, the game doesn't allow us to, since we can only jump when the game allows us to jump. So I take a look around the room a bit, then decide to make use of focus mode and see on the left hand side there's some pipes we could climb. There was very little indication of this, and without focus mode I probably would have stumbled around for a while before finding this. Ugh, this game. So with that, we're off to the next mission where we have to find a book from a brothel that Garrett mentions that Erin went to. So we're off to Erin's hideout to get some information about it. Okay, now is probably the best point to talk about Erin.
It's the Baron's mansion.
Of all the sloppy writing that the game makes use of, which is plenty, the writing of Erin stands head and shoulders above the rest as being the worst part of Thief 4. In the intro of the game, the writers did everything in their power to make us hate Erin and make her unlikable. Now, Garrett pulls a 180 and wants to go find her because of these visions we get of her? Why? We literally have zero reason for wanting to seek her out because of just how unlikable she is. Trying to build sympathy for a character that you've made completely unlikable is one of the dumbest things you could do as a writer, and unless you're an unbelievably skilled writer, you're best off avoiding. You know what this game could have made use of? Some oversight from Mary DeMarle. Who is Mary DeMarle? She is the lead writer and narrative designer of the Eidos Montreal Deus Ex games. Yes, the plots for those games could get a bit messy, but one thing those games excelled at for the most part was creating a cast of compelling, likable characters. It doesn't look like she had any writing credit on Thief 4, which is too bad because the writing team really could have used guidance from someone at their company that had a proven track record of creating likable, compelling characters. The idea of Garrett having a rival thief or someone he reluctantly works with is an interesting premise that the series hasn't really explored before, but they butchered the execution of it. You could have had something like Garrett, who's maybe lost a bit of spring this step, but still full of wisdom, have a fellow thief that's more quick and agile, but a little more brash than Garrett. They could learn off one another, with Garrett passing on his wisdom, while the younger thief showing the old dog new tricks that we can make use of. Of course, the game does none of that, instead makes both characters completely unlikable, and then expects us to care for Erin. We make our way through Eidos and eventually collect this medallion, and off to the brothel we go. Of all the levels so far, the brothel is by far the best. A good atmosphere, more choice of paths to take, and some funny interactions that we can listen in on. That said, even though it's by far the best, it's still mediocre compared to any of the past Thief titles. Eventually we make our way further underground and solve a completely boring puzzle with the medallion we got from Erin's hideout. Good thing we decided to stop by and pick that up. And then we keep heading underground to get this book that was requested of us, even though it was mentioned that I was in the brothel because what's that? Was that the script over there? Did Garrett read it? We enter some ruins further down that looks to be signs of the keepers, and good thing Garrett read that script because the book is down here. So eventually we make our way back up and suddenly end up under bed in the brothel, and who happens to be there but our Daniel Day-Lewis wannabe thief taker general. Some shenanigans happen, the room starts to go up in flames. Instead of, going back the way we came, through sheer cutscene incompetence, the thief taker general becomes aware of us. Luckily though, we do end up escaping, but this cutscene was an utter mess to sit through. Cutscene incompetence, where a character acts completely out of character of how we would act, is one of the worst tropes of gaming, and this game falls victim to it several times. For the next level, we discover that Basso has been locked up, so we're off to go break him out. There's some uprising in the city, but the game doesn't do a whole lot to flesh it out besides various people on the street yelling, and look how few people there are. I should make note now that in going through the city, we're stopped fairly frequently with loading points, which is something that Thief Deadly Shadows suffered from as well. The game also makes use of the classic move through an area slowly to hide a loading screen that we've seen a rise of in the last several years. Now granted, this game came out both on the 360, Xbox One, PS3, and PS4, so it's one of those games that had to be cross-platform that makes things a little bit awkward and to consider. Loaded fast on my computer, but it was still annoying and something to make mention of. We need to break into this house and steal some plans of the keep, and once again there's some terrible level design. On first glance, it looks like I can make my way on the left above ground. The game won't allow me to jump, and instead I have to use focus vision on the northeast section to spot a ladder that needs to be knocked down with a blunt arrow. Inside the mansion, it's okay. It feels more akin to something from Thief Deadly Shadows. Nothing really memorable. Further in, after a simple puzzle and more cutscene incompetence, we end up with a chase scene, which thankfully is extremely short, but feels so out of place in the world of Thief. Again, it feels like one of the higher-ups said, "You know what the kids like? High-action set pieces," in between doing lines of cocaine. So we get into the keep, make a very linear route to Basso, break him out, and Garrett stays behind to rob a larger vault. Okay, I could dig this. This is more like the Garrett of old. But what's his reasoning?
No one is paying you to risk your neck for this.
It's not about the payment. It's who I am.
So we get to the vault, start to enter the combination, and cutscene incompetence kicks in again, and Bill the fake butcher comes roaring in, and now we have to get by these guards to get access to the vault. And hey look, it's the MacGuffin from the beginning of the game. We have another one of those Erin sequences, and we're off to Moira Asylum, because we have to get to the bottom of the MacGuffin, and what happens to this completely unlikable character, Erin. So, Moira Asylum is above and beyond the best level in the game, but here's the problem. Someone looked at Shalebridge Cradle from Thief Deadly Shadows and said, "Hey, that level was really popular, let's make our own." And more or less did a cut and paste copy of it, but missed out the core of what made Shalebridge Cradle such a memorable and frightening level. Hell, I've done a whole video on the level itself if you want to go more into my thoughts on it. There are some decent scares here, and it does have a good atmosphere, but again, it's just copying from Shalebridge Cradle with greatly diminished results. And after this level, I tapped out. I uninstalled this game. Into the trash it goes. People said this is the best level, and if it was a struggle to play through it this far, I want off Thief 4's wild ride. If you want more on the rest of the game, there's a couple of other videos on what went wrong with Thief 4 in the description that completed the games. Bless them for doing so, because I could not put up with this mediocrity any longer. So wow, what a stinker Thief 4 is. This is my first time doing a review on a game I utterly dislike on this channel, and it's been painful. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I haven't played anything so by the numbers and soulless for years. If this was put out by, say, Ubisoft, it'd be understandable, but this is Eidos Montreal, a studio that even with publisher shenanigans from Square Enix, managed to reboot Deus Ex, a beloved series that held true to the original, updated it with modern sensibilities, and managed to retain the core of the original, and have soul, which most modern AAA titles lack. Yet for Thief 4, it's not there. There are some very faint signs that there was a good game in here somewhere, but it's marred down by a number of design decisions that felt focus tested to reach a wider audience, which started playing games in the late 2000s and of course runs its course to this day. I was going to do a bit more of this video, having a section of how to go into ways of fixing the narrative of the game, but it's just such a friggin' mess, I'm not going to bother. I don't want to give any more of my energy to this game, and I hope that's the worst game that I ever play for any game that I cover on this channel. I could see why people said to stay away, and even though I picked up Thief 4 for a couple bucks on the Steam sale, I still felt like it was a ripoff. So as we wrap up this video on Thief 4, what does the future hold for Thief? Don't expect another title in the series. Don't expect a AAA studio to put out a game that actually understands the core of Thief. Like pretty much anything interesting in the last decade or so, you're going to have to look to these smaller independent studios. Look to titles like Gloomwood, which looks to be a spiritual successor to Thief. Look through titles like Neon Struck, taking the core of Thief and simplifying it into a modern minimalist setting. Of course, look to the Thief fan missions that exist in droves out there, whether that's the Dark mod or for the original 2 titles. There's plenty out there to keep you satisfied. So maybe it's just best to let the series be as is. Remember the absolute classics that were the first 2 games, and a fairly solid third. Let's not speak of Thief 4 again. I hope you guys enjoyed this thrashing of Thief 4. Leave a like, comment how you feel about Thief 4. Check the pinned comment for links to my Discord, Twitter, the whole shebang. Hope to see you taffers around again. Boulder punch out.